We're going to try to get going as quickly as possible this morning. Some of the people who are on your folder are not here, and we've been very fortunate that some others have been able to come in at the last moment. And let's start over at my left. Just a brief introduction here. Ronald Sample, representing TCOIC. Ron Edwards was not able to be here, and Mr. Sample was called in, I guess, at the very last moment, so we welcome him. Reginald Berry is over here. He is a student at Central High School. Gary Hines, next to Mr. Sample, a student of Central High School. And Mr. Harold Andrews in the center here. There's no mic. If I can hear it. This is just tape recorder, isn't it? I was told. Tape recorder will have. Mr. Andrews has a number of positions, and I was asking him for them, and he gave them to me so thick and fast I couldn't get them all down. He's chairman of the United South Side. He is retained by the school board for something else. He's an assistant pastor of Sabbathany Church, and I think most of these people probably wear a number of hats, and I don't think we're going to spend too much time with that. Some of their identity will come out undoubtedly in the discussion. And I think the format which we might use is to ask these people to speak as a panel to some of these questions, to interact with each other initially for perhaps the first half of the period that we have, and then we'll try to open it up and make room for all sorts of comments and questions which could very well at that time come into play. The title that has been given to this particular section is that of Our Forgotten Neighbors, and the lead or the subtitle is The Inadequacy of Public and Community Services in the Ghettos. It seems to me that there's hardly any rejoinder to this bleak fact that in our ghetto communities our services are much less than adequate. Parks don't seem to be nearly as common or as well kept up. Playgrounds often are very minimal, if existing at all. Swimming pools, how close? The quality of our schools, many of these facilities are obsolescent or non-existent. Perhaps in the area of social work, there are problems here. The problem of absenteeism, I think most of us would recognize absenteeism of landlords, of teachers, absenteeism of social workers, absenteeism of ministers. We all go back to our own worlds. We're not there. Now, I think maybe the best thing to do is to simply ask the people to begin, and maybe we'll begin with you, Mr. Sample, just with an initial statement, then you can all react to each other, and I'll try to stay out of it as long as you keep this thing moving, all right? Let's move across here.
You want an initial statement from me, and I just got here. That's nice.
Separate paratus.
Well, I can do no more than elaborate a little bit more on what you've already opened discussion on. We all know that the areas which we're talking about are greatly neglected.
I think we're going to have a problem with the air system. It's making an awful lot of noise. Maybe I can ask that you speak a little louder, and possibly it would be a good idea if you would stand for these people over here if you could.
I was afraid you'd say that. There are a great deal of problems that we have to overcome in ghetto areas. You want to call it a ghetto area. This term ghetto, of course, is being grossly misused, but for sake of identification, we do use the word ghetto. At any rate, as you have stated, parks, playgrounds, other recreational areas do go lacking to a great degree in many of these neighborhoods. Also, there's another little angle to this whole thing that is extremely important, and perhaps we'll get into a discussion on that a little later, and that is the problem of the welfare of people in relationship to the people in these areas of we prefer to describe more or less as a poor neighborhood. Certainly, we have found out in the recent months that the welfare worker, or the social worker, if you might call them that, have very little time or can take very little time to do social work. And this has had a great impact upon the relationship between the people in the neighborhood and these social workers. A lot of problems to this one, and I think that everyone should become aware of these problems, and also by doing so, whatever means are necessary, I think we can start working out ways and means of correcting this gross injustice or inadequacy in our social structure. So with that, I'm going to sit down because I did not come here even prepared to participate. I was going to sit out there with you and listen. But somebody spotted me. I think I have on the wrong shirt this morning. So I'm going to let these other gentlemen here go ahead and say what they have to say, because I don't want to say anything wrong here yet.
Gary, do you want to talk, make a statement now or follow up here?
All right.
Again, it might be a good idea if you stand so that they catch it out.
The problems in the so-called ghetto are centered around exploitation. In fact, if not the whole matter of the problem is exploitation. You see, whenever there's a group of people on top, in order to stay on top, they must exploit those below them, or else their position of supremacy, will no longer preside. So they must prey on those subservient to them. In the so-called ghetto, from whence I came, in New York, Harlem, you have to really live with it to know what you're talking about, really. I mean, you can go in and look and study and do this and that, but you don't really know until you live with it, and know what it really means to have a bottle of pop and one of these little 10-cent cakes around here, and that's your breakfast, dinner, and lunch for the day. Things like this. Come home, to who? Nobody's home, your mother's gone, she took the baby to the hospital, the baby got bit up by a rat or something in this nature. Your father's out, playing the numbers, doing this and that, all trying to make some kind of life for his family. You see, black people have never really lived in this country. We've only survived, and it's a matter of survival in the ghetto, survival of the fittest. And you see, this is why you can't be, there's no such, I don't want to hear anything about any black men being dumb. Undereducated, yes, possibly, very possibly, but not dumb, because you can't be dumb and black and survive in this country. Every black man alive today. Every black man alive today has to have some very high degree of intelligence in order to survive in this racist society. So you look in the ghetto and what do you see? Vices of every sort. But why? You see militancy. Why? You see prostitution, pimps, and all this mess. Dope addiction. Why? It wouldn't be there unless it was a necessity. People have to have something to grasp on, something to live with. And so with that, general statement more or less about conditions in the ghetto, I guess turn it over to Mr. Andrews.
We're going to skip Mr. Andrews just briefly, and we're going to jump over here to Reginald Berry.
I belong to a group in Minneapolis, which is known as Decoy, Determined Ebony Council of Youth. One of our jobs is to get black people together. We feel that the problem for white people, like Lillian Anthony said, was to get white people together. Our job is to get black people our age together. Black people so that we're the ones who know. And you can be an adult and think what your child needs, but we're the ones who are getting what you think we need. So we feel that we have a better position because we're in a position to get it. So we feel that we have enough sense, the youth of our age. Gary is in 10th grade, I'm a senior. The youth of our age to think for our own selves. So Decoy, one of the things we've done was we've had Malcolm X, this parental excuse. That was through Decoy, Determined Ebony Council of Youth. Martin Luther King will have that off. That was through Decoy, Determined Ebony Council of Youth. and we're working on other projects in the neighborhood. One thing I think that we have to realize is what a ghetto really is. I think it's the dictionary, it might be the Webster New World Dictionary. It says a ghetto is a group of ethnic people in a certain area. Therefore, all over the country, we've had Polish ghettos, we've had Italian ghettos, Swedish ghettos. Harlem, before the black man inhabited Harlem, Harlem was owned by the Swedes, by the Germans, by the Irish, and then came across the black people. They were the last immigrants, or not immigrants, but people to inhabit Harlem. First they were in Greenwich Village and all over. See, black people were on the boats, unloading. On the shores, unloading the Irish, running from the potato famine, unloading the boats for them so that they could settle in such areas as Harlem before they ran from, I believe it was the Germans. Another thing I think we have to realize is whatever happens in Minneapolis is going to affect whatever happens in this state. And whatever happens in this state is going to affect what happens in this country. And whatever happens in this country affects what happens in the world. Therefore, white people try to get themselves together in Minneapolis. They'll be doing a good justified thing because they'll be helping the state, therefore helping the world, the whites all over the world. Another problem that they say in the so-called ghetto is what I believe is black power. Black people need power. Black power is to control the politics and politicians in their communities, control the businesses in their communities. That's what's made the black ghetto in the first place. It's like when a white person owns a store in a black district, ghetto, so-called ghetto, what happens? You take your money from what you make from your little job or what you got, the black man has got from pimping, or a woman from prostituting, or whatever means they had to survive in that society, in this society. They take it to that store, what happens? The white person doesn't live in that community, that poor black community. He lives out in, let's say, no offense on none of you, the suburbs. So what happens? He takes his money that you give him to the suburbs and he spends it out in the suburbs. While the suburbs is getting richer and richer, the city, the so-called ghetto, is getting poorer and poorer. Therefore, that neighborhood is poorer and poorer. Like I say, it's control the politics and the politicians. You should get somebody politically so that they can have something to do, so you can get what you want through politics in that community. For instance, over by Central High School, the railroad streetcar tracks that are still there. It's been there ever since the streetcars disbanded. That's one of the things that we need removed, let's say, that I know of around Central High School. Another thing we should learn in all the schools in Minneapolis, all over the country, the history of so-called minority. I say we're so-called because I believe minority, the people that they say we are minorities, I believe we are in the majority. Because like I said, whatever happens in the city affects the state, the country, and the country, the world. There are more black people in the world than there are white. So I believe that I am a majority, not a minority. We should learn the history of black people all over the world. The history of the Indian, the Portuguese, not Portuguese, the Spanish who came here and who were also oppressed. We should learn the history of them so that we can have more respect for them as individuals and as people.
Okay, Mr. Andrews.
Well, there's so many ways of approaching such a broad subject as you have here. However, I'm interested in a couple of things. As everyone has been talking about this word ghetto, and as we use it, as far as composing a certain element of people into one geographical area. And it has its evils and it has its good side. I'd like to relate to you a story of my hometown, which is Gary, Indiana. Gary was founded in 1906 by Judge Albert Gary, and that city was built around those steel mills for the purpose of having a community for the men to live in, to work in those mills. Well, we know the story of labor, and we know that even those of us who are uneducated could weld a hammer, push a wheelbarrow, or just scarf, which is taking hot steel and throw it around. This kind of work was available, so you found a lot of black people migrating from the south to the great north to get such jobs. And as this began to happen, more and more would come. One fella come up and say, well, this is pretty good. I'll send for old cousin Zeke and his 8 kids. And so he sent for Zeke. Next thing you know, black people started to just expand in that city. But there's a peculiar thing about it. Just as they were just mentioning, they were fused into an area of 6 square miles in that city. And as they began to diffuse, they would spread out within the realms of this radius. And so what happened? We began to look around and we realized that out of the 9 councilmanic districts in the city of Gary, Indiana, we were living in 6 of them, but we didn't have any representation. Here's a perfect example of black power. We got together and we decided, well, we've got to make the people aware of their political prowess, that they have the power at this point to put into office some of these people. We're talking about political economy as far as black power is concerned. So the first year, myself and another gentleman ran for office, and we came in second to the incumbents. Then later, you know what happened. We have a mayor there now, a black mayor, a black chief of police, a black chief of the fire department, assistant chief is black. We got a black echelon in the city hall now. And it's what it should be, because the population there is, and I quote, 55 black, 35 white, and the rest is what they call undesirable. Boy, that must really be bad. I won't even mention who they are. However, this is an example of black power, of how it can be used and how it can be turned around, the ghetto can be used against. If the white man were really smart, the best solution to his problem, which is the black man, is open occupancy. Because when you put these people together, they began to share attitudes, they began to share frustrations, and they began to unite. And next thing you know, you've got an explosion. Then you say, well, isn't it awful, a riot? But it's not a riot, it's a rebellion. It's like a coiled spring. You just push it back so far, and as far as it's going to go, and it's coming back the other direction. And this is what's developing. And in reference to your social agencies, there's a great exploitation there. I found it in my hometown in the fact that I was running for the office of township trustee. But I came here and found the same thing is just as prevalent in Minneapolis, Minnesota. People are being exploited tremendously by such agencies. Number one, your public relief. There, we found that people who had food vouchers would pay almost 50% more than a person who paid cash for food. Then there were certain stores that you had to go to, and these stores were being fed under the table through the administrator, and they had a thing going. The exploitation. And then if a family is starving, now this is supposed to be an immediate necessity in this particular office, that's why I'm mentioning it. You walk up, you say, well, I need food right now. My family is hungry, we don't have rent. Well, would you fill out this form and bring it back next week? And you're starving. And this is what's going on. It would be funny if it were not so pathetic that such a thing is prevalent. As far as the welfare is concerned, I work for the welfare department. I find the same thing prevalent here with your welfare department. And that's this. You give one caseworker, a load of about 271 cases. Now he's got to figure out a budget for all these people. Then here comes food stamps now. So now he's got to make out a pink form for the food stamps and certify the family for food stamps, and then expect to see 271 people out of 365 days regularly. And they all have their dire needs, their immediate needs. How can one individual do this? Then the budget is strained. Why, a guy get a degree in social work and sociology, why go to a Hennepin County social working office when you get more money if you go to the school board or you go elsewhere and get some fancy title and a big salary and you sit down and sign papers all day? So it's this thing. Number one, I think there should be more money. And this comes through your county board. There's too much political chicanery involved. And this is the things that cause the exploitation. Some of these things are not black and white issues. They are political issues. The issues that we need to just clean up the city, polish it up, go into the administration, and see what is being done. We're sitting here right now. I doubt if 7% of you are aware of the things that are going on in your Hennepin County welfare department, and you look at that poor caseworker and say, why in the hell ain't you doing your job? And they're doing the best they can do under such circumstances. But you don't start at the top of the tree. To any tree surgeon, and I know nothing about it, but I know I wouldn't start looking at the leaf to cure it. I'd go down at the trunk, go down at the roots. And this is where we need to start our administration as far as alleviating the things involved with our caseworking and with our welfare. Now, just on a one-to-one basis in the community, you talk about our neighbors. This word is a word that has been tossed around as much as any other word. It's a word like, I'd say, table, chair, and that's how much I feel about it now. This is what we feel about it. When you say neighbor, it's just an inanimate object. There's no compassion anymore for neighbor. This I'm talking about is attitudes. You know, one time Christ was asked who his neighbor was, and he told a story about the Samaritan. And if you're familiar with the Mosaic dispensation or how things were in that particular area, the Samaritans and the Jews had no dealings with one another. The Samaritans were unorthodox, and they were people who were looked down upon. But he was a Samaritan, one who was an outcast in society, such as a black man who came along and helped this man who was supposed to be more privileged than he. This is, he said, is his neighbor. Now you want to know who are our neighbors? No more our neighbors are people who offer lip service. No more our neighbors are people who shake their heads with sympathy. But our neighbors are the people who help us as we struggle along this journey, along this road, as the man did the way forward, who really give us the aid. You say, what kind of aid? I don't think I'd have to duplicate what Mrs. Anthony has already said. That's one way. And this is one way to affect attitudes. Now, what I have found as far as attitudes is concerned is this. When we're in such a meeting as we are in now, it is so easy to get any one of you who are white to stand up and say such eloquent words about, I believe, and this is what we should do. But when you among all white company, do you have the courage to maintain that same attitude? I am in such a position to know that in most cases you do not. I have talked to people who are sincere enough to tell me that when they get into all white company and they begin to discuss this thing, and somebody said, well, the niggas are looking for a handout. And I'm quoting something, which I'm going to tell you about a little later. And they say, well, yeah, that's right, and you get right in with them. It takes courage. What am I saying? Belief is not enough. Belief is not sufficient. It takes faith in what you're doing, not belief. I often demonstrate to my congregation that I could say to all of you and probably convince you to an extent that I believe that this chair will hold me. But until I execute my faith and sit down in this chair, you cannot say that my belief is worth a thing.
Okay, very good. Now we've had a number of things broached here. I wonder if I might. Well, maybe we ought to go back here to Mr. Sample. You did say that you wanted to say something more about social work. Did you not suggest that?
I said I hope we would get into it.
Maybe it would be a good idea, I think, at this time to ask ourselves some questions about, or for you to interact some on the question of social work and problems that might be here. Now, whether you have any suggested solutions is...
Well, Mr. Andrews touched upon it as well, very well. The point of it is an attitude or a practice, but we don't seem to realize in our social structure, our social welfare structure, that actually we criticize the people for being on welfare and then penalize them for trying to get off. And this is kind of ridiculous. Not only that, our social welfare system is based on an intentional, seemingly intentionally to break up the family. One of the most ironic things is that in order for a mother or a family who needs the help to get, for instance, on money, if the father cannot make enough money because of inability to get enough, the kind of employment which will enable him to take care of his family, the system is now structured so he has to leave home. He has to sit down in the living room with his wife and say, look, I can't make enough money to feed my family. You can get more on ADC. I'm going to leave home. You file for a divorce and then go and get on ADC. In other words, we actually encourage the breakup of the family. Then we criticize the mother for getting on ADC. Now, she's on ADC. Maybe she doesn't like to be on ADC. And we found in our experience that generally they do not. But if she has the intestinal fortitude to go out and try to find a job, she has to find a job good enough to compensate for the losses she's going to experience when she gets that job, or else it's a financial risk for her to take the job. And this is what I meant by we criticize them for being on relief, and then we turn right around and penalize them for trying to get off. Right. So on top of that, we are encouraging the breakup of the family. To me, this is a very strong part of the necessity of changing this particular structure in our welfare system. Also, Mr. Andrews pointed out the interesting fact that we have far too many caseloads per case worker. These people go to college for 40 years to learn how to do social work, and they turn out to be nothing but an accountant investigator in the home, and have no time whatsoever to counsel these people and to help them when they need help. And this is my indictment of our social structure.
Now, I'll give you I mean, this is not hypothetical. This is a case that I had. There was a young lady who had graduated from high school and had been put in just such circumstances that her husband had left home. After which she applied for AFDC. Upon her application, she was accepted and she moved into governmental housing also. Number one, she was a kind of person who, she came from a fine home. She liked to live good. She bought a television. They wanted to know where she got the money to get a television. Well, this is just one little minor thing. Then, she had been taking a nursing course, but she hadn't completed. She went down and got a part-time job at Methodist Hospital, and the money that she was making at the hospital, it was a supplementary sort of thing. But what did a caseworker have to do? Counterbalance that to her budget, what she was receiving from welfare. Consequently, she said, I may as well just sit home and then just make the money. I'm making no more because they're taking it off from what I'm making on my from my welfare. This is a thing to keep a person on welfare. To alleviate poverty, you should create a system, a program within the system in which you could have people to graduate until they are off. But as it is now, you must stay poor. To keep the exploiters in business, you gotta stay poor. You gotta stay on relief. Another very interesting factor, and I've questioned Congressman Frazier last week when he was here about this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, along with your USDA statistics, United States Department of Agriculture statistics, state that they consider a family of poverty to be making $3,500. Each year, those of us who are employed, fortunately, who do earn a living, every year we get an annual increase in cost of living. But that has not been increased as far as the poor man is concerned since 1959. In other words, we make more because, cost of living. Isn't the cost of living going up for the poor people? So still, to qualify even, not only for AFDC, you take the kids, I work with kids in the school, to get on the neighborhood youth corps to work, your family has to make this. Family making $4,000 is just as poor as the 35, and you know it. You couldn't live on $4,000. I can't by myself. And this is what I'm saying. The thing is so structured that the poor, as they say this about Republicans, but I won't say this about Republicans, I just say it generally. The poor get poor and the rich get richer. And this is the way the thing is set up. This is the way the structure of this thing is. And I think if there's something to be done, if there's somewhere, not just to point a finger, but some source in which we can approach to really alleviate such a situation, and so that we can't say that people are in poverty and they don't want to get to. We got a lot of this Calvinistic Puritanism going around too, that those people are just destined to be that way. And we're destined to be this way, which is ridiculous. But we find it in Congress. This is why you have some congressmen saying, we don't want to pass any more bills on poverty. We have to get to the source. And the source is getting to your county board or getting right there in Congress, which is pretty difficult now. Let's not be ridiculous. Let's work at the county board level and get such things alleviate. And as we say, as Reggie has said, if we can get it done here, then it will affect the state and it will affect other areas, and perhaps it can be done all over the country. But I must also commend, I want to commend this city. In spite of all of these things that are here, I found in my traveling all over this country, Minneapolis, Minnesota, by far is the #1 city as far as I'm concerned. Here, I see progress moving more tremendously than anywhere in this country. But that is no means or no reason for us to stop. But we must continue to remain on top.
May I ask a sort of a general question here? If any of you want to say more here, that's fine. But it seems to me that we often get the impression that great numbers of people in this country have become, well, the nice word would be disenchanted with the establishment or the various political establishments, and have more or less thrown up their hands and said, what's the use of trying to work through the establishment? Now, I've noticed, at least from some of the comments this morning, that utter hopelessness does not seem to be present here, that there may be some possibilities. Now, can we ask this general question about the whether you think that the means of meeting these problems is via various establishments, political, economic, and otherwise? Can we reform them? Are they reformable? Or is the exploitation of such a sort that these things have to be shaken, not just shaken, but perhaps even destroyed and other forms take their place? It seems to me that there's been, let me say, sort of an optimistic conservatism here represented in what you have said, Mr. Andrews, and perhaps also Mr. Sample. What do you think about this panel generally? Now, Gary, you haven't had a chance to say anything since you started. Maybe we ought to not discriminate against youth here either, right. And perhaps give our high school representatives a chance to say something.
Well, you said a mouthful. Could you put it in one question that I could,
Well, Gary, is there any hope? Is there any hope working through the establishments that we have? That is, the political processes. Can we sufficiently reform the political processes, or reform, meet the problems through the political process? Do you see hope here?
Oh, well, yes, I see hope, but I see hope as a black man, and when you see hope as a black man, that's a pretty broad range, because when you're in a position of subserviency for such a long period of time, 400 years to be exact, you see hope in a whole lot of things. And you have to differentiate between that which is superficial and that, which is meaningless. So, as for the, going through politics, it's possible, and I do see a certain amount of hope in it. But one thing has to be done. We have to start getting some black politicians, up in some of these positions, because you just don't do things the way they are now. Have a white man speak for black people. Come in, look at the so-called ghetto, and to tell the truth, there aren't enough black people in Minnesota to make up a real ghetto. But come in, look, observe, and all this mess. Copy down data, whatever you want to call it, take notes, and come back and report to his little group, and all of a sudden, he's an authority on black people. Nowadays, they have such thing, and I don't use the word, but this is the terminology they use, Negro psychologists, Negro sociologists, You come in, like we're some kind of animals, things of this nature. But as for seeing politics as a direct means, you have to include politics naturally, My definition of black power is political, psychological, social, and economical advancement for black people, by any means necessary. So if politics is one of the more pleasant means, then so be it. But if politics takes too long, like it has been doing, passing bills to make people human rights bill, taking the country away from the red man, and then tells him he has to do a certain thing before he's a citizen, if that's what your politics are going to do, forget it, give it to us militants, We know how to handle things of this nature.
You got to remember, there was no noise made until they had the so-called riot, which we call social economical revolutions. They didn't pass things. People weren't congregating in rooms like this all over the country until after the so-called riots. And then you remember when the riots were, as soon as the riot happened in Detroit, the first thing that this government did was pass an anti-riot bill. That's going to stop people from rioting. It was in the newspaper. And there's a part of the South which they call the Black Belt, where black people are congregated in a certain area among cities, I think, and states. Am I correct? Remember when the Civil Rights Bill was being passed in 1964, the same people who are trying to stop the Civil Rights Bill from being passed were the people, the white politicians from that area of the Black Belt. This is the way our government was set up. They tell us that the South lost the war, yet still look who we had running for president. 2 people from the South. 2, I don't care, 2 which I say are more racist. Johnson and Goldwater. You have a person that's Goldwater, or Wallace right now, who is a segregationist. And he's almost in a position where he can announce he's going to run for president. This is the way this government is built up. Through politics, it takes something like a social economic revolution to bring about the freedom of black people in America. When I say black people, I say anything that isn't white, because anything that isn't white has been exploited by white people. That's why I say it has to start from the grassroots level. You have to start within yourself, white people. There wouldn't be no problem at all if white people weren't racist. That's where it all started from the first, besides the slaves back there. Wouldn't be no problem if it wasn't for people who we got in position as president that hates killing, sellout, things like that. This is in our country. This is in our government. Where everything we say is America is our country. It's our country, right or wrong. It should be, is our country right or wrong? Because if you learn the history of the so-called minority people, or black people in America and the world, you find out that our country hasn't been right a whole lot of times. If it has, we wouldn't be in this predicament we are in today. This is something we have to look within ourselves and realize. Is there a solution to the problem? I find the solution to the problem is right here, in our high school and in our colleges. I find talking to high school students and college students, there are more, not really sympathetic, more speaking out for black people, for the oppression that they've had for all these years than these older adults. What can we do? We got, like I say, you get the people, high school and college students. You know what the problem is because you see more of the problem. Because you're getting a little bit more, like I say, communication is bringing the problem to you. So what you gotta do, you gotta educate. You gotta look around you and see the situations and you gotta do something about them. Not work with us, and be the leaders of us, but work with us, side by side.
I'd like to speak to this hope bit as well. Naturally, when you have life, there's hope. If you feel that there's no hope, a person who feels hopeless gives up. But a person who feels that there is hope continues his struggle. Now, he takes his struggles as he sees it, as he sees it's necessary to take them. 20 years ago, we were trying to communicate in that nice, easy way, pat my hand almost, a prayerful look. Nobody listened. Funniest thing about our good old people here in America, we can't, good talk, sweet talk just doesn't get it. The only thing it gets is a girl. But when it comes to rights, or if it comes to creating a situation to eliminate injustice for justice, for some reason or another, we can't listen in America. It takes an act. It takes the sledgehammer between the mule's eyes in order to get your attention. And if it has to be the violence, which seems to be your means of communication, then that's the way it is. Certainly we have tried to communicate with you in so many ways to show you that we didn't want to join the establishment. Many times before, I have listened to many of the black leaders say they didn't want to change the establishment. They only wanted to be a part of it, that they wanted to share in the fruits of the economy. However, today we feel that perhaps it is a necessity to change a few things. Certainly, any action that we take in a political action or any other kind of action is an action for change. Whether we can do it within the structure, as it has been pointed out, remains a good deal in white America's hands, in your hands. It's according to how you're listening, and it's according to how well we can communicate with each other, and with how you can communicate with yourselves. But certainly if you're not understanding what it is that we're trying to say by word, then some kind of action has to be taken in order to get your attention. And so we do think that there is perhaps some hope that this can be worked out. But we don't believe now that it can be done entirely within the establishment. There has to be changes.
Do you have any more here now?
Well, I may want to say that I believe indubitably that this is definitely an era of renaissance. And as Mr. Samples has said, we are a nation who respond to violence. Our history tells this. The reformation of industry and labor and capitalism in this city, capital I meant to say, in this country was a result of riots, those of us who can recall. And it has always been this sort of spontaneous action that has really gotten attention. But I'm looking at even something more important. This is an element of a different texture, one that is so foolish. You see, discrimination, I see nothing wrong with discrimination. I discriminate. But it's a thing that you base your discrimination on. Because there are certain people that I definitely will not socialize with because we have nothing in common. There are people who, I can go backwards by myself. I don't want anybody to help me go backwards. I discriminate from those type of people. I discriminate with the man who has no ambition. Where can we meet socially? But he could be black, blue, purple, or green. It's the thing that I discriminate upon, not his color. As I walked into a high school, I was investigating racism. And when I walked into the door, I was discriminated against. They didn't know whether I was Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, what? They didn't know if I was rich or poor, a fool, or wise. But they knew one thing, when I hit that door, I was black. And right away, the attitudes began to form, the little animosities began to come. As I walked into the principal's office, one of the faculty said, "Hey, we're gonna get a little civil rights action here, huh?" Tongue-in-cheek thing. And this is what I'm saying, it's so foolish. If I had two glasses here, a white glass and a black glass, and you wanted to drink, and there were holes in the white glass, and the black glass was in perfect condition, would you refuse the one that was perfect because it was black and drink out of the white? No, it was because of what the thing could do. And this is where we look so foolish, and it's so childish the way we base these little idiosyncrasies on, our discriminations upon, when we look at a person because they're black. This is the attitude that we want to discourage. Personality, we know there are people. If there's anything I detest, is for a white person to walk up to me and say, "Man, I like colored people." Because there's some of them I can't stand. But if we're gonna be frantic, let's be frantic. And let's be candid about the situation. And let's look at it, be more realistic is what I'm saying. As far as the structure is concerned, as far as the system is concerned, there's definitely a reformation in the system. Because at this time, no more will it be done through legislature. No more will it be done by the bureaucrats, but by people like us. After all, we are the government. Originally, we were the government. But now, it's one individual who goes and sits in a seat and talks and says things that you may not even believe in and votes for you. We must begin to put pressures. If we really feel this as a people, that we want such a thing done, then we must affect our legislature to the extent that he cannot go and legislate acts that we do not, that we feel that we don't want to be legislated. This is why it must start here. And I have all the faith in the world in youth. I believe that this situation will be alleviated, and it will be done by you. It will be done by the youth of today, this generation, because I see my hope is in this generation. As Berry has said, I have very little faith in the generation that superseded me. But we're young people. We're going to get it done, that's all.
Well, I want to open it up now to responses, questions, comments, or whatever kinds of response you think. I'd like to accept my own invitation first with a couple of specific questions. That's something that I've got going for me by sitting up here. With respect to this question of political participation and leadership, black leadership. Now, let me raise a question here in the context of the Twin Cities area. We have a metropolitan council which has no governmental powers really, though some people hope it will have more governmental powers. Now, there might be it might be true if we were to work toward develop a truly metropolitan area government for Minneapolis, St. Paul, and their suburbs, with some kind of a common tax base and a common acceptance of what are really all of our problems. Then the suburbs would feel more a part of the whole thing, that we might be able to do something here. It might be a plus thing. On the other hand, this would dilute black power in terms of voting bloc or in terms of something like this. Is there any response that any of you have to that?
First of all, in Minneapolis, on the south side of Minneapolis, black people are not congregated in one certain area. You may think they're congregated on 4th Avenue, but that's not true no more. But in no certain area, Minneapolis, the south side of Minneapolis, there's black people spread out all over. One of the main issues that we feel, Decoy feels, is that the suburbs are getting paid, the schools, the teachers are getting paid more to teach out in the suburbs than they do in the city. Therefore, if a teacher graduates from, say, Augsburg College, and he's a good teacher, he's not going to want to teach in the city because there's no money in the city. So one of the main, to get around one of the main issues is to get somebody, all over the schools, the school districts, all over the state, to get the schools ran by statewide basis.
Okay.
Once again, you sort of said a mouthful. Could you put it in one specific question?
Well, would metropolitan government, the whole metropolitan area, would this help or hinder the solution of these problems?
It would hinder it, definitely. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I'd like to draw a little synopsis here between some clothes and human beings. Okay, I'll speak up. If I go into a laundry to get some clothes clean, and I have one load of white clothes and one load of black clothes, now the object is to get both sets of clothes clean. However, I find that if I put both sets of dirty clothes, white and black, in the same washer, they not only do not become clean, but when I take them out of the washer, I find that they have each other's lint on them. I find that the white one is all grayed up from the black. I find that the black one is all grayed up from the white. I find that everyone's all linted and dotted up, and things are worse than when I put them in there. However, I find that when I put the white one in the washer, get it clean, and put the black clothes in the washer and get them clean, and get them all dried up, then I can put them in the same basket together. Now, what does this say? The lint represents animosities between white and black. Now, on the white side, white people are still too racist. You've just found it out, with the President's Advisory Commission report. Black people have known it for 400 years, And black people are, seeing the fact that we know this, black people are too bitter. Now, you just don't mix bitterness and ignorance, you see. You have to get that's the so-called liberal. I hate to offend any liberals here, but to me there is no such animal, really. Now, what has to be done, so many white people find out a little bit about the situation and all of a sudden become authorities, but we won't get into that. Find out about it, and the first thing they want to do is rush into the black community, arms open, wallets open, pockets open. What can I do? I've been wrong so long, just trying to throw this over black people. And like I said, black people are too bitter. 9 out of 10 times they tell you, go home, honky, we don't want you. See things like this. Why? One, it's time for the black man to stand up on his own 2 feet. We've been waiting on the white man too long. 2, every time he sees a white face, it represents everything he's fighting for, you see. Not so much you and your white skin, but what your white skin has enveloped in the past, you see, and held over black men. So when you come up there with your white face, arms open, wallets open, what can I do? Don't watch it. You know what you can do? Go out in your own communities, as the man mentioned before. Anybody can stand up with the elegance, of a Frederick Douglass or a Patrick Henry in your case. And before a group of black people, and spout off at the mouth about how much they love this and how much they know this is wrong and mess of this nature. But what about when you get out in your own communities? You have to get out into your own communities. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do among ourselves. You see, this is a revolution. Revolution comes from evolution, which means change, gradual change. Only our change is changing a little bit faster than revolutions in the past. You see, we have to redefine our set of values, which is why nowadays you see the natural, the long, kinky, curly, whatever you want to call it, hair. You see, we're trying to redefine our own set of values so far as beauty goes, and self-poise and things of this nature. The reason black people have been straightening their hair with the various lies, permanents, hot combs, and this nature is because ever since, say, the black women has been able to read or look in a magazine, 17 or co-ed or ed, co-in, co-out, all this mess. Every depiction of beauty is white and has long flowing hair. Well, like I said, this is a revolution, and things are changing. Now we're saying that black is beautiful, what we have of we're proud, and yours is no better than ours. So as for people coming in, we've been exploited too long. As soon as black people try to get together and see a white face there, they're gonna expect exploitation. And white people have been doing it so long, they may be doing it unconsciously. So we better, like I said, get in our own washers and get our own selves right separately.
Okay, now I'm going to forego my other question because got to get you in here. I want to remind you of these gentlemen's names so that if you wish, you may address your questions or comments to particular persons. Mr. Berry, Mr. Andrews, Mr. Hines, and Mr. Sample. Berry, Andrews, Hines, and Sample. And Don Nickel had his hand up first. I'm going to ask for his question.
It seems to me that one of the things that's been mentioned several times is this business of the black heritage. And I was wondering, what would be the best way to get this black heritage known? It seems to me that at Augsburg College, we should probably have a course, something along this line, specifically oriented toward expounding this. And I was wondering how you felt about approaching it on this level, or what level do you feel is best? No one in particular.
One of the things we did was Decoy did. When we went before the school board. We got history, true history. One of the things we said is we wanted true history taught in all the public schools. The problem is from K through 12. When you're coming up through grade school, the first thing when you learn how to read, you read about Dick and Jane. Dick and Jane out in the suburbs with a fine car, pretty dog, everything's mellow. So that right away the black youth has nothing to relate to, and the white has nothing to relate to with the black. So what they're doing now, I believe in some of the grade schools, they got integrated Dick and Jane books. Like, and I don't know about the suburbs, and they're still in the suburbs. Another thing is like K through 12, the problem, like say you take a grass or a weed, you don't cut the weed off at the top and expect the weed not to grow no more. You got to get down to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is when the youth is young, when he's coming up. It's funny when when you're young, you can play with white kids and you see no difference. But as soon as you start going to school, then you start seeing the difference. Your mother says you can't play with him no more. Or their mother says they can't play with you no more. Things like that. It doesn't start until you start getting to schools, when you start getting related to all these books. So what you got to do, history's got to be taught. One of the things we said, was K through 12. True history taught. History of black people, contributions that they've made. Tell you, we always talk about Charles Drew because that makes me mad every time I think about it. He was the inventor of blood plasma, a black man. In 1948, he got in a car accident. I believe it was Georgia. What happens? He went to a white hospital. They wouldn't serve him. All he needed was blood plasma, the invention that he had, the invention that he made. And what happens? On his way en route to a black hospital, he died. So what we got to do, we got to start getting these things together while we're down here. Your little brother. You got to start letting him know. That's why I believe it's in us. It's in us youth. That the problem is going to be solved. You want to know what history do? You can find history books of the black man anywhere. One of the greatest books is Before the Mayflower by Jerome Bennett. But then you can't stop at that book. You got to start reading on and on. about the black man. I was lucky. I got learned, and so were most black people. They taught me white history in school. I learned about Patrick Henry's great statement, liberty or death. Taxation without representation is tyranny. Black people have been taxed without being represented since they've been here. He didn't say nothing about that. Or liberty or death. That's all they're crying in the so-called ghettos, liberty or death. Yeah. Say good.
Oh, did you want to?
Yeah, you know, this is important, I would say. I mean, but we say the basis of this society is education, and yet it's the most outmoded facility. I guess you're aware of this. Even in reading, we have gone back to the original form of teaching kids to read. Now, it's a very vital issue here at hand. I was looking at a test yesterday, not a test, but a survey, and the question was, I just wouldn't answer it because of the question kept talking about, did I think that the culturally deprived children, I don't believe there's such a thing as cultural deprivation, but cultural differences. And this is where education must come in to let you know. Because we don't learn by white standards, we're deprived. When really, white America is deprived. Because they must learn of our standards and let them know that there is a dual standard, that we do have a heritage. This is the essence of education in the schools. But it must go beyond the schools. It didn't begin only in the schools. As Gary has mentioned, psychologically or socio-psychologically, we could say that what is known as the Negro self-complex or the self-hatred complex, which is evolved from this, is gathered at an early age. A kid's looking at television, and he sees the story. Everything is white. The hero is always white. And a black man, his eyes get bugged, and his kinky hair straightens out, and he runs. You know.
Especially when he sees Tarzan.
Right, nothing to relate to. When they look at Tarzan, that's a beautiful example. Here's a native with a G-string on, and he's got a spear with the head. If he did that, it would fall off. And he's running from a lion in the jungle. Incidentally, lions don't even live in the jungle. That's a plains animal, if you know anything about Africa. But anyhow, he runs, and along comes a white man on a vine, screaming out a God-curdling sound. No weapon, he's got a knife. I've never seen him pull it out till he gets to the water with the alligators. And he says, "Ungawa." And the lion walks away. And here's a kid looking at this. He's looking at this, a black kid. And he's saying, man, I ain't nothing. This is what he begins to think. He begins to develop this self-hatred complex. So he begins to socially interact with whites. He says, I want to be white because this is white. But also the white, this is what you're not looking at. The white kid is victimized too. Because as he looks at this same thing, his connotation is this, that of whiteness, that I could be an idiot, but if I'm white, I can make it. And he's right too, the way this thing is structured, the way our society is structured. And then there's this unconscious development of black and white. There are over 200 synonyms which depict black as ugly. A man who is ousted from a union, he can't get a job anywhere, he's blackballed. And we know darn well black has nothing to do with not getting a job. Oh, yes it does, I'm sorry. But you see what I'm saying? Blackmail, you can just think of all kinds of words like this unconscious development of it. So, yes, we must start an institution, and we're behind, and we're the basis. The universities and the schools are the basis of education in society, the basis of the structure of it. And yet, we're so far behind that you got to go out in the community like we're doing right now to find out about blackness, when it should start right here. I agree with you, and we're doing it in the school system.
I was wondering what you think about getting the black community and the Indian community together. I work in both groups, and I find that when I'm in one community, I'm definitely in that community isolated from the other, and in the Indian community isolated from the black community. I'm talking now about the west side.
That's
in
two.
both communities.
That's two different
And
heritages.
it's not. My ideal is one community. I mean,
Well, what is
that's
black
what
and
I
Indian?
think would be the ideal. But I was wondering if you think at this point, using your analogy about mixing clothes, black and white clothes, if you think that red clothes should not be mixing too.
See, black people have a whole lot of colors, black, red, and yellow, and brown. So when we say black people, this is my connotation. When I say black, I mean anything that isn't white, because that's what it is. White people are not white. They to the extreme. Some of them may be pink as rose flowers, or or so on, gray is a Hank, ghost. But white people are not white, but they relate to the extreme, which is white. Put up to this sheet of paper, none of you are white. Black people, a lot of black people are not black, but they relate to extreme, which is black. You say mix Indians and black people together. You know, you try to change it. Why Indians and black? Dirty clothes, they've both been exploited by white people. They both have different heritage, different backgrounds.
But do you think they can be brought together?
We work together.
We work together. We have what's his name?
Yeah. Gray.
Gray. This dude,
Harold. Yeah. We work together. This is what
Where's your Indian representative?
Do you want us to live together? Is that what you mean?
you say today. Did you invite the Indian?
Yeah, he was invited.
Well,
No, yes, you do live together already on the north side, I know. But I definitely feel
white folks live
barriers
on the
there.
north side too.
Pardon?
White people live on the
White
north side
people
too.
right.
and they're exploited.
And I definitely feel barriers there. And
Well, all right, I'll tell you this. The Indian isn't here. My grandpa's an Indian. I'll represent him. I'll give you a little Indian history, a little exploitation. How many of you are familiar with the Cherokee March in Georgia? When Cherokees were based right there in Georgia, had land given to them by the federal government. And when they tried to throw them off or take them off this land and put them on other reservations because it was too fertile. Anywhere you want to know, in a map, if you want to know where the worst land is in this country, the less productive, the most desolate, just all you have to do is get your Indian territorial map. And that's where it is. This is what they've done to this man. They put him on this land, and he's got to till it. He's got to make it produce. But now, they had a nice piece in Georgia. And what happened? They were forced off, but they used the white man's structure. They used the Reformation. They went along with the bureaucrats, and they went through the federal courts and went up to the high appellate councils, and they won their case. They won their case. General Grant was president at this time, and the federal court said that they had a right to stay there. You know what Grant said? The president said, all right, you gave them this. You gave them these rights. Now you help them stay there. And he had his troops to take these people on a forced march where thousands of them died. And then as they were marching along, whites would come on, taking their horses, taking their property, and no one to defend them, while the cavalry marched them off this land. This is what's happened to the red man. You wonder why the red man is as you depict him, the vanishing American with his horse tail tucked, his head drooped. Here's a man who has more of a gripe than anybody here. He is the only man who can say he is an American. He was here before, well, the black man came a year before the white man came. In 1519, the black man was here as an indentured servant, working this land. Next year, here come the Pilgrims. All right, ever since that time, this man has been given the worst bit of it. This man has been felt that he's at a point of defeat. And not until now. Not until now. Now, you say, you see, here's the thing. Let's look at it for like it is. You say the Indian doesn't have any get up and go. You ask George Custer how much get up and go he had. But you see, when he did fight, it's the same thing. We've been doing it all through history. When we rebel, you call it a riot. When the Indians attacked the white man in that time, it was a massacre. When he attacked us, it was a victory. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, it's a history. Now, as far as working together, we're definitely working together. Harold Goodscott, who I want you to hear him speak. I wish you were here now. A very impressive speaker. But the heck with speaking. We got things we're doing. No, it ain't in the Tribune every day. It's not in the Star. But that's not where it's at. We got action moving, and as Berry said, when we say black, we're talking about the Indian, the Puerto Rican, any other minority group, as you so call us. And if they're out here, they're represented. And that's why I want to go on record right now is representing them. Because we're not speaking, when we say black, we mean black, red, and any other color. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to say or how it's going to come out, so I'm going to say. First, I'd like to, Mr. Berry, you said that Minneapolis school teachers are less than suburban schools.
It was told to me that teachers get paid more because of some law that was passed while the suburbs were growing, get paid more for each student out in the suburbs that they teach.
They spend more on this.
They recently, this is a recent raise in the school system. It's $6,700 now, which is quite a bit more. It's not the teachers It's just the institution itself. And it's a separate system from the Minneapolis public school system. And this is actually the problem. In relations to the LSOP and Pettigrew debate about schools, quality of schools, and Pettigrew says that we should bus them. But I go along with LSOP and along with, what's his name? Well, anyhow, this is what he said. It's not the color of the school, but the quality of it. When we say quality, we not only mean the facilities, we're far less facilitated than they are in suburban schools. You know this. I was in Edina last week, Edina High School, and it looks better than Augsburg, to tell you the truth. And I mean, they've got such tremendous things at their disposal. Now these things are gradually coming. We've got a few talking typewriters coming into our system. Mr. Ober negotiated on that. A few things, but still, that's just facilities. It must be quality also in the teacher. Now, as far as the sensitivity you're speaking of, I assume, I think that should develop right here, going on with the young man's question over here. Right here, you should get some exposure to what's going on there. And even in your practice teaching, why don't you go to a ghetto school and get some exposure?
I'd like to answer to your question a bit too. I don't know where your statistics or figures are from, but I've talked with many teachers here, and they have admitted to me that they can get paid more in suburban schools than they can in the city schools. And these are people who ought to know. They're the ones who are getting the salary. In fact, one lady told me she wanted to teach in Hopkins because she's going to get more money, we're going to have better equipment, better facilities, and easier children to teach.
I don't know, maybe the increments are higher in the suburbs. Like, I'll be starting at 63.45 next year.
One teacher that I knew quite well left from out of the suburbs of Hopkins, and she was making $9,000 a year.
There's a difference.
Yeah, maybe I can.
Yeah, the top, the level isn't as high as the suburban. That's true.
One last question. I don't know to whom to turn here. Is there one last question? Okay, one last question.
I was just curious, it's been brought out that the welfare system is so inequitable and so poorly constructed. In what way can we affect this now? Should we write our congressman, or how can this be?
This is the way it's going to have to be done, as we've tried to point out. And the reason why I'm fairly familiar with this, I have just recently had conferences with the entire staff of the Hennepin County Welfare. And almost to a person, they agree about these particular handicaps. Number one, they are tied by whatever our national policies happen to be in welfare work. They are just workers. They have to do what they're told to do. So we do have to work this through our legislation. We have to be aware of where the injustices lie in our welfare system, and it has to go through our legislative processes to get it corrected. These particular problems hinge on, is our welfare really helping these people, or is it actually relegating them to a subservient situation out of which they find almost no means of getting out of it? If we have a good welfare system, it will help the needy people, but it will not be a hindrance to them helping themselves when they so desire to do so, and most of them do. I've met very few people on welfare, and I've talked with quite a few, who want to stay there. A man wants to be a man. A woman wants to be a woman. And they don't want to have to go around feeling they have to live on handouts all their lives. But our welfare system has put them in this bag and has allowed them no way out.
I just wonder, we had the Kerner report and everything, this commission looking into riots. If the welfare system is this poor, then it seems to me we should really have a national commission looking into this kind of thing. It's got to be changed that much.
Yes.
And young man, if you want to pursue this, I want to give you a little something else to take along. There is an element or a segment in the poverty level that is totally ignored. Welfare is designed now for two elements. The family who does not have a head of a household, who cannot survive, and the old people, the aged. This is all they support. And there's a third segment that only one federal program helps, that's food stamps. And that is where there is a head of the household and there's insufficient income. They can't get a thing anywhere except relief, and that's temporary and it's very menial. So this should also be included. Food stamps is different. Some of you could get food stamps because it's all it's relying upon is your income, by ratio to the number of people in the household and employed. You must have the total income, and then if it's less than that 35,000, then you qualify for food stamps. 40 for food stamps, you see. But that's the only program. But I think it should be more flexible for that family. Then a father wouldn't have to leave the home too.
Well, we've come awfully close to the guaranteed income idea without ever mentioning it, it seems to me. That was the other question, and we don't have time for it. I want to say thank you to our visitors this morning. This was, I'm sure, going to be very helpful to us, even if we strayed occasionally from the more specific topic. I want to say thank you to this group, and I want to remind you that at 11:15 we have the next presentation, Violence versus Nonviolence, and that will be a general meeting downstairs again. Thank you all very much.